welcome to Spice Files. I'm Mike, once again joined by my good friend Dave. How you doing, Dave?
Hey, Mike. Doing great. Good to be here.
Awesome. So we're here to talk about this wonderful event that both you and I played in. It was called the Maze of Ith, and we have the organizer here, Shawn. How you doing, Shawn?
Hey, good. Thanks. How are you, Mike?
I'm good. Cool. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the event? It's maybe a little more complex than your everyday old school event, so I figured we should take some time to kind of walk through it first.
Yeah, sure. So there are a few moving parts to sort of how the event worked, but I think, like, for the most part, from the standpoint of deck building, there's a couple things that are important. So the first one is that the event was designed to encourage people to play with cards from the dark, and so the way we did that is by creating an in-game mechanic that's called the ley line of Ith. And the way it works is you pick a color, or you can pick colorless, and then as long as you have at least 12 cards from the dark in your deck, for whatever color you chose, you get to cast spells from the dark of that color for one colored mana less, and also activate their abilities on those cards for one colored mana less. Or if you choose colorless, instead it's just two colorless, but the same effect. And then the other thing that was important was that we didn't fire it as like a straight Swiss type event. Instead, there was like a random timer that would just kick off rounds randomly when people, with whoever was available. So we would sort of fire the first round, everybody gets a match, and then people finish in kind of whatever order. And then they kind of go into a lobby, they're waiting for the next rounds, and we randomly will fire a round. There's a bunch of math. We can get into the math. I don't know how interesting that is to do, but basically you expect to typically wait 10 minutes or so between matches. And so that meant from a deck building standpoint, you also wanted something that was reasonably fast. You don't want to play like a heavy control deck and take an hour and a half in all your matches, because you'll end up, I guess the other, how do you win this tournament is relevant too. Basically, there's a lot to that, but basically once you get 6 match wins, you're able to start, there's a puzzle you have to solve to win the tournament, but basically your goal is to race to 6 wins. And so if you're playing a super controlling deck, it might take an hour and a half, 2 hours per match. You might never get to 6 wins. If you're playing an aggro deck, you might finish, get to play like 9 or 10 matches and finish 6-3, 6-4 or whatever, and still win the event, even though you lost some, because you were the first person to get to 6 wins. So,
right.
Yep.
Yeah, it was definitely it was an exciting event to play in, and I think it was partially because of that tournament structure, right, where you're pretty much just like, okay, boom, boom, let's play some Magic, right? Mm-hmm. And it was pretty fun. I also say this with the caveat of I have not really recently played one-day events, so for me it was kind of like, oh my god, I have to play a lot of Magic all at one time. But yeah, it was definitely a lot of fun.
Yeah, I know, and there wasn't a lot of downtime. I mean, that's obviously by design with the way that the rounds fire, but it very much felt like it had it was a race. Like it felt like a race. It felt like a sprint, frankly, and you had to kind of stay with it for all. It ended up being about 6 hours, right?
Yeah,
just maybe a little under 6 hours.
Yeah.
And that aspect of it felt super unique compared to other old school tournaments, other Magic tournaments, even like the one-day tournaments. You have a very predictable amount of downtime between rounds, and with this, like I can tell you, like just as a player, like when my matches went to game 3, I was like, oh man, I am missing an opportunity to get into the next round that could be firing like in a minute. And having that kind of like, I don't know, feeling like you were missing out on opportunities to get paired again and again and again.
Yeah.
It added this sort of, I don't know, just kind of I wouldn't say stressful like dynamic, but it was like something that you're always kind of aware of. The clock is ticking, and the competing wizards are closing in on the center of the maze, maybe faster than you are. So that's something that you're kind of aware of in a much different way than, you normally are conscious of other things happening in a tournament.
I think to some extent that was like, I'm glad it kind of felt that way. That was almost, it is supposed to be a race, right? You're like racing to the center of this maze against other wizards, and only one person can win. But also, like, from a practical standpoint, it's maybe less than ideal for people to be like fully stressed out for 6 hours. So, I think one of the things I'm doing is I'm trying to get feedback from all the players just to about both the deck building, like the Leyline of Ith stuff, and then also the tournament structure, because maybe this can be something that's a tournament structure that's useful. But I want to make sure, like, we should make sure that we tune it the right way and don't have it like be too stressful or whatever. Like another idea, for example, was like maybe we should build in some sort of downtime so that you're guaranteed to have breaks at some point. You're not constantly sort of sitting there waiting for your next pairing, or maybe do it as a best of one rather than best of three matches, so that there's just whoever wins the first game, and then you just go back in the pool, and there's no sideboarding, so there's no slowness of sort of deciding about how to sideboard, and your opponent, you're watching them pile shuffle, they've sideboarded and now they're pile shuffling, and they're like, come on, you put 2 cards in your deck, let's just couple matches and let's go. But yeah,
there are so many different variables and levers that you can kind of mess with coming out of this. I mean, I think you hit on something very exciting, especially for the webcam format. Like at an in-person tournament, you want the downtime, right? You want to hang out with your friends between rounds, all that stuff.
Right.
And you want to understand like how long you have to get a drink and whatnot. Right. With a webcam tournament, though, like it's actually a pretty attractive structure to say, okay, for the next X hours, for the next 5, 6, 7 hours, whatever it is, you're going to be able to jam a lot of games, and you're going to know that your time is going to be used extremely efficiently. Like it was, in a way, like it was the most respectful of players' time, like more respectful of players' time than any other tournament that I've ever played in, because it's the mechanism for minimizing downtime worked so well. But of course, the other side of that sword is the other edge of the sword is that there's no downtime and you're playing, for 6 hours straight.
Yeah, I mean, there were some people got in more than 20 games in 6 hours. I think the most number of matches played, somebody played 9 or 10 matches over that time period, over 6 hours. There were a few people on the other side, though, because it is random, right? There were a couple of people who got kind of hit with, they had to wait 25 minutes. But
they got some bad RNG.
Right, exactly. So there is this, like, there's an outlier case that goes the other direction. So there's some balancing maybe to do around that, just to make the worst case scenario not as bad. And then on the flip side, there were some people who came out, they turned in their match result, and then I repaired them in less than a minute after that.
Yeah, that felt like it happened to me, or pretty close anyway.
Yeah,
at least once or twice.
Maybe people like that, maybe they don't. I'm not sure. Yeah. But anyways, it happened, and so there's some thinking to do about this structure maybe for the future.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Well, I mean, it was very cool, and I thought that, again, as a brewer and as a player, like the mission accomplished in terms of featuring cards from the dark in a way that they really certainly are not in any of the vanilla, like 93, 94 formats. Yeah. And even in like Singleton and 1.5 and other kind of like more like kind of powered down variants, you see some of these cards creeping in, but they were spotlight. I mean, they were really the stars of the show in a big way. So I thought that really checked that design box with a heavy check mark. And
I think that was like, that worked out, I think, better than I had hoped for. Everybody, absolutely, there were 31 players actually ended up playing in the event, and every single one of them had clearly put time into their deck, thinking about what they wanted to do, like exploring the card list from the dark, like finding the hidden gems. There's like stuff that is never, not even close to playable in old school, shines in this format. Like one example is Fire Drake. So normally Fire Drake is like a 3-mana 1/2 flyer that can fire breathe only once per turn for 1 red mana, and it's very, very unimpressive. But in this format, it's essentially a 2/2 flyer for 2 all the time.
It's the best bear in the format by far. Yeah.
Right.
And in a color that sorely needs bears.
Right.
Just really, really wants them, right?
Yeah. And then of course there's all the like one drops that like green is full of these pretty good like one drops that still the do see play in like regular old school, like the Scavenger folks and the Elves of Deep Shadow of the world and kind of those guys. Those are now 0 drops. So like you can have all these 0 drop 1/1s. That's pretty good. You look at the colorless decks and like the mana and card draw engine there, of being able to play Felwar Stones, Standing Stones, and then for the Book of Wrath, like when you take 2 colorless mana off all the costs printed on those cards, it's bonkers, right? You've got Felwar Stones or Moxen, Standing Stones are 1 mana rocks of any color, and then the Book of Wrath is essentially Yawgmoth's Bargain or Necropotence.
Necro, yeah.
And then there's even like odder stuff like Apprentice Wizard, which is cute, right? But like normally, like you can probably come up with I think Dave, maybe even you have like tried to work it into like a 1.5 deck.
It's really bad,
but it's not really bad if it only costs 2 mana to cast and just taps.
And just taps for 3. It's pretty impressive. Yeah.
You can like turn 2 or turn 3 amnesia someone pretty easily with an Apprentice Wizard. So yeah, I was really thrilled to see how much energy all of the players put in. We had 6 Spice winners out of the 31. Like part of me wanted to be like everyone should get a Spice award here. Everyone has brewed. Everyone put effort in. But you know, we tried to pull the best of the best kind of out of them, and also represent some different archetypes. And those were the ones that sort of were the spiciest, I think. So,
gotcha. Quick question: what did you kind of expect to be the common decks, or like since you sort of invented the format, what do you think everyone was going to do?
So at first, I missed the colorless deck when I was designing it. Like I saw Felwar Stone and I was like, that's pretty good. But I looked at the rest of the cards and I was like, these don't really do anything. Like the reason colorless got 2 and all the colors got 1 is because the colorless cards like how do they win? How does that deck actually win? And I wasn't really sort of building whole decks in my head, and I missed some of the things people came up with. So I was pretty worried that we were going to see this like mono colorless metagame where it was just like out of the 31 players, 26 of them are playing the colorless deck and nobody has a good time. So that was one worry. Cards I didn't see that I expected to show up were like Scarwood Goblins, which is a 2/2 for a red and a green normally, but if you're playing either the red deck or the green deck, that's now a one mana 2/2, but no one played that. And then I think I don't know. Let me check. I have like actually a little list of other cards that I didn't see. I didn't see Safe Haven. I was curious whether anyone was going to try and do anything with Safe Haven, but I think the colorless decks just didn't need it. Like Safe Haven is just way too cute for the power level of that deck. Right. And then I think Season of the Witch, that was another card that I was hoping someone would find some way to do something with. But the problem with that is that the black deck is just not.
Black is so bad.
It's pretty bad. Which is so funny for the set called the Dark that even after you do this Leyline of Ith thing and you take a colored mana off all the cards, it's still not good enough. Like the real way to balance it might be to set colorless back to 1 mana and give black the 2 mana advantage.
I think the best black card is Dark Heart of the Wood.
yeah. Which I think I will. I don't know. We could maybe start looking at some decks. I'm not sure if we'll see that in the colorless deck that we're going to look at, but yeah, powering Dark Heart of the Wood with Book of Wrath and like Fast Bond, which is I think what you, Mike, and also Jeff Liu sort of independently came up with. Yeah. That's a ridiculous engine that lets you just be able to draw 10 cards in 1 turn or whatever. So
yeah, it was pretty crazy. I mean, I had games where I just I would time walk 3 times in a row by just regrowing it and recalling it, and then I had all my ivory towers out, so I would just gain a bunch of life on the first one, draw more cards, gaining more life and more life, they would chain themselves. Yeah. It was a pretty wild experience. I'm not one to have played a ton of combo decks like that in my time playing Magic, and so I was like, well, I think I can do it here, so might as well. I'll just give it a go.
And I think the fact that it turned out not to be a dominant deck, that's a very good deck. It's probably objectively the highest power level deck in the format, but but it's not totally dominant. You guys still like lost matches, and like you can come in under that deck, or they can just draw. They can whiff. You can whiff drawing too many cards. So it was good. It was good to see that actually happen, because one of my favorite decks in old school actually is Eureka Lich. Like, it's just a blast to play. It's a blast to watch someone trying to go off with that. And this deck kind of functions like that, except for a little more efficiently.
I think it takes on average longer to play a match with that deck than it does to play a match with, like, White Weenie or a red deck or whatever in general. So
that's a good point.
Which kind of evens things out a bit, right? Which is kind of, to your point, it may be like objectively the most powerful thing you could have been doing, but it's not necessarily the deck that's going to win this particular style of tournament.
Right.
Yeah, there's a lot of different like variables in play here in terms of the power balance, just the way that the rounds are timed and structured. Right. Whereas if you had, like, for example, like a monthly or like a derby structure, like untimed rounds, like go out and play people, I think those colorless decks are the real deal, and given enough time to play the rounds out, those Ivory Tower or Booker Ras decks or something else. Well, should we jump into the spice here?
Yeah, for sure.
Do it.
Awesome. Well, first up, we have Park Cofield.
Yeah, so Park's deck.
Oh my God.
It just has, like, this is everything, right? Like, this is what I really was hoping to see somebody do is really kind of go into the tank here and, like, pull out some fun stuff. And so, like, the core of the deck is basically, like, it's going to try to Evil Eye of Ormsby-Gore, and it's going to Dance of Many them to have enough eyes, which is, like, the main problem with the Evil Eye decks is that you get your 4 eyes, and then they shut off every other creature in your deck, and you can play Clone or whatever, which he has a couple of, but with the cost reduction, Dance of Many becomes a pretty efficient copy spell. And then he kind of surrounded it with a bunch of other like cool little flavorful things. So he's got the Apprentice Wizard with the Amnesia engine. He's got Flood, which I saw Flood putting in a lot of work in a lot of decks. It's with the cost reduction, it becomes pretty efficient. And so I thought Park really did a great job coming up with this one.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I've always enjoyed, honestly, I think Evil Eye is one of the best control win conditions. It's just incredibly hard to kill.
Yes. Yeah, no, I agree with that. It's really resilient. I love everything about this deck. I think it really takes advantage of all of the key, or almost all of the key blue discounts from the ley line. I think the only card that I saw in the course of the tournament that's not here, and obviously wouldn't be here necessarily with the eye attacking plan, is Ghost Ship. That thing is ridiculous at 3 mana for a 2/4. Flyer that regenerates for blue. Really good good card in that format too. But yeah, taking advantage of the Apprentice Wizard, which we mentioned earlier, which can help you ramp out the eyes and also cast that turn 3-ish Amnesia, which he's got a couple of there. All like the 6 clones, great. I love the Howl from Beyond as a way of dumping some mana late from your Apprentice Wizard if it's still hanging around.
And I have a Howling Mind story from his deck, actually, because I was I was eavesdropping on people all day trying to see what people were doing, and I was watching him play, and I forget who he was playing, but it was one of the colorless decks with Coal Golem, and Park made a Dance of Many copy of Coal Golem, and then attacked and then didn't get blocked, and then he Howl from Beyonded for like 6. And then, unfortunately, of course, his opponent had the lightning bolt and killed him. But the fact that it was there, like in Howling Mind, because it works so well with other parts of this, like it works great with that Apprentice Wizard. You've got, he's got a bunch of lands in here too. Like the factories, once the eyes are down, the factories can't attack anymore, but he can get them for mana and put it into the Howl from Beyond. So like, there's a lot of little things. This is like one of those decks with the little things. He's got the like Nevin Rolls Hercules engine, so he.
I was just going to mention that, yeah.
So like, there's a lot here.
No, I mean this is a Maze deck too, right? It's a Maze disc controlled deck. He can bounce the discs back with the Hurkels and the boomerangs. He's got 3 boomerangs over there. Yep. He can bring in more Hurkels out of the board. There's a bunch of
vaults too with the Hurkels. So
yeah, exactly. There's a bunch of sneaky other synergies here beyond just we're not just copy and eyes, guys.
Right.
There are other layers to this onion. I mean, Park is
like the one counter spell, the keep them honest counter spell. Like once they know it's in your deck, then they're scared of it for the rest of the match.
That's right.
Yeah. I appreciate this clone altar with the Mario and Luigi.
Yeah.
That's
pretty cool. All right. I mean, we can move on to the next deck, I guess. This is pretty cool, though.
Yeah, I love this deck. Mm-hmm. All right.
So let's see. Next up, we have Jason.
So Jason Beaupré's deck here. Jason was the sole player to take on the challenge of black, and so he played black, which in black the cards that are good are few and far between. You've got kind of Bog Rats and Bog Imp as reasonable, and then after that it kind of goes downhill. But so he splashed green, which makes sense because he's got you know he can get the Elves of Deep Shadow in that way, and the Scavenger Folk, and those count for purposes of being cards from the dark. They just don't, for turning on the ley line, they just don't get any sort of bonus. But then the like whole idea of this deck is to like Nether Void your way and like Worms of Earth your way into winning. And so just having the Worms of the Earth, that was one of those cards also that I was hoping somebody would try and work in and build around it and make something work. And like this deck does that, so I was really happy. This deck is pretty cool. He also had the main deck, 3 of the main deck Energy Flux, which was critical tech for those colorless decks. There were lots of times.
Yeah, I love that.
Yep. There were lots of times where I'd log in and check a match, and it was one of the players was colorless, and there'd be like. They would have like 1 Mishra's Factory on the board and nothing else, and their opponent has like 6 lands and 2 energy fluxes, and they're like attacking with Scavenger Folk or whatever, like. And there's just for the colorless decks, it's really hard to come back from that. So, Jason I think put a lot of time and thought into this deck, and it kind of showed with how it performed.
Yeah, okay, so Bog Rats are a 1/1 for 0, and Bog Imp is a very reasonable, basically a script sprite for one colorless, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Which is cool too, right? Because he has some non-black producing, he's got some basics and Pendelhaven there. So he can cast that Bog Imp turn 1, even if he doesn't have a black source, or even if he's not leading with a black source.
Right.
Which is actually pretty cool. And yeah, Worms of the Earth. This is a card that I, of course, have tried. It suffers. Well, obviously, in regular 93-94, it's garbage because it costs 2 black. And really, this is a card that you want to cost like 2 or 3 or something. It's really it suffers from the problem of giving your opponent a choice. And whenever you have a card that gives your opponent a choice, they always choose the better deal, right? So they take the 5 damage if it doesn't matter, or they sack 2 lands if it's it's late in the game and it doesn't really matter. They don't need those 2 lands anymore if you're casting this thing for 5 on whatever turn 7 or 8, right?
Right.
So one or the other probably doesn't matter as much. Here, I think I like this. I mean, you've got the sinkholes. You have Hymn to Torak, which is like virtual land destruction. You also have 4 strip mines. 2
ice storms.
And the ice storms as well.
And he's got 2 ice storms. Yeah.
I missed those up above the sinkholes.
Yep.
Then you can lock them out with Void, and like losing 2 lands or taking 5 damage under Void, that might matter a lot more. And you can chip away with. I really like the Order of the Ebon Hands here too under this plan, because once the Void is down, maybe you're not casting stuff, but you can sink a bunch of mana into them.
I saw him attacking with like 5/1 orders and 6/1 orders and stuff like that.
Exactly.
Yeah. He's also got Ashes to Ashes in there too. He's got that as a 1/of, which normally that card, sort of intended to be the counterpart to Dust to Dust. It doesn't get played because it's got, it costs 3, but more importantly, you hit yourself for 5 when you kill 2 creatures. But I'm actually kind of curious how it performed for him, but it's cool to see it in a deck. I think it makes sense here to clear the way for those orders or those bog imps to try to get in there. So.
Yeah, I mean, it makes it so your opponent really, it's tougher for them to stabilize with a big creature or two. I mean, the challenging thing is that it doesn't hit artifact creatures. So if there was any kind of, your coal golems or your diabolic machines,
I'm so thrilled that card made it out too. I saw there were some diabolic machines in
machines,
yeah. And it's a 4/4 for 5 that regenerates for 1, I think, or 2. Like that's not a terrible card.
Yeah, no. It's pretty good in the shops deck. I think it's reasonable. Yeah,
and there were at least a couple shops aggro decks that used it. So pretty neat.
The one card that I'm kind of noticing here that I thought maybe would be in like larger quantities in one of the black decks. If more people had played, maybe we'd see it. But he has one copy of the Fallen, and I actually think that card's pretty good. Like a 3 mana.
Yeah, I mean it doesn't fly, right? Does it? It doesn't fly.
It doesn't fly. But it has 3 toughness, but it does that like damage over time effect.
It's like Naf's ass, but forever, right?
Yeah.
That can be relevant. You might be able to stick a turn 3 Fallen, and then maybe you ashes to ashes 2 of their guys and get through with it, and then it just stays on the table for a long time. Just kind of like with the Nether Void and like the land destruction plan, you kind of like keep pushing them back on tempo and pushing them back, and like slowly those pings add up.
I think there is again, I think black is the worst color in this format by far in terms of like benefit from Leyline. I think there is a pretty reasonable Bad Moon aggro deck that maybe has like even like a couple of the Fallen and like maybe a Zombie Master or 2, and get some of the Swamp Walk going, and pump your guys up with the Bad Moons, and importantly, Bad Moon can get your black weenies up above the threshold of dying to like Holy Light, or like to a lesser extent like Falling Star or Earthquake or whatever.
On the zombie discussion, there's also Merck Dwellers, which is in this case a 3 mana 2/2 that's just a 4/2 if it isn't blocked.
It's 3 mana post Leyline, right?
Right. Yeah.
It's normally 4 mana.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a reasonable aggro card. A 3 mana 4/2 is like. That should be fine. I think if you have enough threat density that like, getting a guy bolted or something doesn't matter. I think I like that.
Like it's just 3 colorless, right? And normally it's 3 and a black. And so and this is something I guess maybe Park did a little bit, is those mana vaults, but they can help you ramp out turn 1 those sort of 4 mana creatures that are like 3 and a colored mana. Which I don't know if anyone really like built around that, but it's it might be a way to try something that's kind of aggro mid-range, like a fast mid-range deck. But anyway.
Well, hats off to Jason Beaupre for giving it the college try here with black.
And he ended up 50. He was 50% on games. He won 11. He lost 11. So that's great. I think that's.
That's the most respectable finish you'll ever see for Worms of the Earth, right?
Yeah. So and he got to play 22 games of Worms of the Earth black in 6 hours. So
mission accomplished. All right.
Awesome. All right, let's move on to the next one.
All right, so next, is it Dave Portal next?
Yep.
Yes.
So Dave, so there were a few green decks that were sort of they all sort of operated on the same theme of like this idea that you have cheap these cheap 1-drops, and cards like Spitting Slug is actually kind of great for 2 mana.
Spitting Slug is Serendipity in this format. I'm not even kidding. It is a card and a half here.
Yep. And so Dave got the Spice Award though because he went a little deeper in the dark. He plays the playset of Scavenger Folk, the playset of the Elves of Deep Shadow, the playset of People of the Woods, the playset of Trackers. He's got Niall Sylvan in there, which isn't actually that it's still kind of expensive, but like regeneration is a pretty good effect. That's removal a lot. And then he's got the Spitting Slug. So he had 19 cards in his main deck from the dark here. And he also, I believe, was the person who played the most, both matches and games. So he played 9 matches and 24 games. And like, that's because, like, look at this deck. It's capable with the Giant Growths and the Berserks of just like completely smashing face and winning on turn 3, or whatever. And so, so I think that was also like a strategy that he built into this deck.
Sorry, I'm doing the important work right now of Googling or scryfalling Avoid Fate. Just noticed the Avoid Fates in his sideboard have been white bordered, which I am 100% on board with. I love white bordering cards that have never been printed in white border. I think it should be done more often. Now that I look at it, the Elves of Deep Shadow also fit this description.
Yeah, I didn't even notice that. That's awesome.
Dave is a devotee of green. He's a great guy from Pennsylvania, and he's dipped kind of in and out of the old school scene over the last several years. But back in the day, he had a fully green workshops deck. He called it Sylvan Shops, and that was impressive. It was actually a fantastic build. Featured Berserk also. And it's great to see he kind of picked old school back up some months ago, and has really, his devotion to green is really very impressive. And so it was great to see him represent the color in this event. Yeah, in the turn like 3-ish Goldfish kill is quite real with the 4 Giant Growths and 4 Berserks.
Yeah, I think I like remember reading something where Wizards said they were talking about Berserk and a few other cards. The cards that they made in sort of the early days where they let things be multiplied rather than added together, that those were like the cards some of the cards that they regretted. And like, I think that's they didn't want to see turn 3 kills when I don't think Richard Garfield intended that, but they printed cards that let it happen. So, but yeah, this is like a pretty cool deck. There's like one aspect of the wolf hiding in there too, which is pretty sweet.
Yeah.
So.
Under the regrowth.
Under the regrowth, yeah. Yep.
And it's Lana Werelves under the Nile Sylvain. That's not a playset of Nile Sylvain, just to be clear. There's some the Dark Elves hiding out back there. Yeah, this the aspect of the wolf. That's great.
I like People of the Woods also. I've looked at that card many times and been like, what am I going to do with this? But for 1 mana, that's not bad.
Right.
For 1 mana. Now, and that's one that like its toughness is based on a function of your forests in play.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that sounds correct.
We're gonna look it up.
I think it's a 2x.
It's a 1x, so it's a 1/1 for 1, but don't cast it off of Pendelhaven or it will die on turn 1. Because it literally has 0 toughness if you don't control forests. Its toughness is just equal to the number of forests you control. So yeah, be careful not to cast a turn 1 off of Pendelhaven. You'll be or an Emerald. You'll be really sorry. But yeah, that's a crazy card actually. A 1 mana could be like a 1/5 or something.
Yeah.
That's a decent rate.
Scales with because you're probably dropping the forest 4 out of every 5 turns or something like that.
Yeah.
So it scales pretty well to hold the ground.
It also passes the Holy Light test generally, which is in case and we can talk about this a bit later, but in case you didn't know, Holy Light I think is basically a one-sided Wrath of God in this format, especially if you're on red or green. And your creature mix is set up a certain way, and the most attractive way too, right? Like using these 0 mana 1/1s is like part of the fun of this format. I think Holy Light is sort of the police a little bit, but we can chat about that later.
Yeah.
But not for People of the Woods. It has no problem with that.
People of the Woods. Tracker too.
Tracker's fine. And again, the Spitting Slug is so good.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I just thought this was like a really sweet deck. I would love to play this. There's 20 or 24 creatures in it. Like,
that's my kind of number. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Very cool.
Cool.
All right.
Next up.
Let's see. So next I think is Patrick Quinn's deck. So Patrick was on red, obviously, and there were a few players on red, but Patrick's take was, I thought, the most unique. The other players were doing the goblins thing, which is cool because again it's the 0 mana 1/1s. There's goblins of the Flarg, and you can play like the goblin digging team, and then some goblin kings, and get some, maybe you put some Mons goblin raiders in there too or something, and like you've got a pretty sweet deck coming together there. But he went more sort of mid-range with it, and played moats plus creatures that don't care about moats. And so the Fire Drakes, which we have talked about, as a 2/2 flyer for 2, that's just a strong card. The Brothers of the Fire, with also benefit from the cost reduction, those are good. And then he's got the Granite Gargoyles from the core set, but they fit great in this deck. And then I love to see stuff like 4 Fissures, I mean, it's expensive removal, but it's it kills any creature or land, and I think it also stops regeneration.
And it's an instant.
And it's an instant. I didn't even realize.
You can hold it up. No, that's a really important thing. He's like, end of your turn, fissure. Whatever the most important thing on the board is. Basically, it's like, holy smokes.
Yeah, or like fissure, you attack with some clever banding group, and then they fissure one of your guys, and then they kill your band.
Well, I think the nice thing about Fissure here is that it actually complements the Brothers of Fire very, very well. Like the Brothers of Fire can take care of any old little thing that doesn't pass the Holy Light test anyway. But Fissures are there for everything else. And, he is splashing white, but you'll notice he doesn't have Swords to Plowshare. Like, he's not giving you life.
Right.
He does want to burn you out or, kill you with, Fire Drakes or something.
Right.
Fissure, really, it trades pretty favorably with any kind of like mid-range fatty, and also has the modality of, kill Maze of Ith, kill Factory, anything else. So,
and he's got the main deck sort of combo of Cop Red and Inferno also going. Which that Inferno can reset the board if you need that. It's also just a finisher, and he can Cop Red himself if he needs to. I think that also protects against the Brothers of Fire damage.
Yes.
So. So that's, it was just a nice collection. Everything does something too. Like talking about the splash for white, he's got 4 disenchants and no shatters. And that's because disenchant, like the mana works well enough, and disenchant is better than shatter, generally speaking. And so, he like put the thought in to figure out that was how this deck should work. So like there was some craftsmanship here, figuring out, even though it looks like there's a bunch of 4-ofs, right? Like, there's some cards that are good in the format in 4-ofs, but the little details are sort of where it shines here, I think.
Yeah. And hey, the white splash also gets you access to Holy Light out of the board, which is the better Wrath of God, basically, on this one.
I was mentioning to someone in a completely separate conversation that that if Fissure were a red and 3 colorless, that I would play that card all the time. It would be actually, I'd put it in sideboards. It would just be like, I probably wouldn't play 4, but like I would.
It solves a ton of problems that Red has.
In the white, especially in the 1-strip formats, like Stone, you can play Stone Rain if you want, like Library Insurance, and like you can kill Factories or Maze of Ith or something like that. But it also can be just dead. Yeah. And to be able to also kill a creature is just for 1 colorless more, and now it's an instant. Like that would be a huge upside.
Yeah. You can deal with Sarah Angel for crying out loud. You can deal with Urnham Jin or whatever. And Red really struggles with that.
Or what's there's another card. I think it's Demolish. Do you remember Demolish? I think it's a red and 3, and it kills a land or an artifact. I'd even take that card.
I mean, I played against Patrick, and it was actually round one, and I thought for a while that I was going to be playing against the 8 goblins, for a 0 mana deck, because he showed me the Fire Drake. I'm like, oh wow, he's going to be aggressive here, and then slowly but surely I understood what was happening. I was very, very grateful to dodge the moats actually by game 3. I hadn't seen moat. I had boarded down to 1 disenchant because he'd really only showed me the Jalum Tome by that point in the match, and I was like, and actually, he told me after the match that I had like not randomly, but like kind of instinctively stripped Plateau in kind of the first few turns, and he said that kept him off double white, and he had a moat stuck in hand because the moat would have completely ruined my day. This design is excellent, and I felt like I got away with one in that match. He won the first game, I believe, and then we went to 3.
Another card here that we can probably talk about is Blood Moon, which is interesting. So Blood Moon, it's on the short list of the best cards from the dark in normal old school. But I was really interested to see what it would be like in this format, because there's probably going to be a lot more mono or close to mono colored decks.
Yeah. Right.
So I don't know. You guys both, did you guys run into Blood Moons? Did it do any work against you, or you were just going to be fine because you?
I was fully mono. I had 14 planes in my deck, and disenchants. So I didn't see a Blood Moon all day.
I didn't see one either. It definitely, I just pretended like it didn't exist. It definitely would be somewhat good against my deck.
I think so. Those decks with Darkheart that rely on all the forest duels, it should give fits to that, right?
Yeah.
If it turns off that whole aspect.
I was playing all the green dual lands, right? So it just would have turned them all into mountains, and I wouldn't be able to suck them to Darkheart. It would be problematic, but I just kind of pretended it didn't exist. I mean, I have a Chaos Orb to handle it, and maybe something from the sideboard. But yeah, I just kind of pretended it didn't exist.
As one does.
I like the 4 detonate. I think that's a great meta call. Just knowing that colorless is going to be a thing, and not like colorless cards like in regular 93, 94, where it's like Moxes and maybe you don't have good detonate targets. Like in this format, you have there's always a Standing Stones or a Felwar Stone, or Book of Wrath is sort of not realistic to kill with detonate, but your coal golems and whatnot. There's stuff that you can blow up.
And that's maybe an important rules note here, is that the ley line doesn't actually change the actual cost of the card. It just changes what you have to pay. So if you want to detonate a Felwar Stone, you pay two mana plus the I guess the red is free, so it's just 2 mana. No, detonate is Antiquities, right? Yeah. So it's a red and 2 to blow up a Felwar Stone, not a red and 0. But yeah.
And I don't think we can leave this deck without, 2 things. One, is that a Summer Raise Dead down hiding there in the lower right?
Oh.
I think so, yeah.
Oh boy.
I don't even want to know. And then the other thing is just the casual column of $700 worth of Arabian Nights Mountains on the left. For the lulz.
Excellent.
This is a sweet deck photo. Very well designed deck.
Yeah.
Nice job, Patrick.
Awesome. All right.
Okay, so next, this is probably my favorite story deck of the tournament. So this is Ricardo Centazzo's deck. Ricardo, he lives in the U.S. now, but he is Italian. He grew up in Italy, and his plan, he was planning on playing in Maze of Ith for a long time, but he went home to Italy for the holidays, and travel restrictions ended up stranding him there, and he was not able to get back to the U.S. in time for the tournament, and so he was actually going to just drop out. He had messaged me and was like, "Hey, I'm stuck in Italy. I don't think I can play. And he was like, I have a box of cards in my mom's basement. Do you think that I would be completely outclassed if I were to just build something random out of those? And I said, yeah, I mean, there's probably going to be decks all over the place in power level. And so so this is what he built out of the shoebox of cards that was in his mom and dad's basement in Italy. These are his actual Italian the dark Obscurita, and then the Italian sort of core, the base set. And that was what he had. Those were his cards as a kid. That was what was at his parents' house in Italy. That was what he built his deck out of for this event. And so I thought it was sweet, and it's full, it's got some of the good cards. It's got the Sunken City, which I think is something that some of the blue decks were running. That's a good card for this format. And it's just the story, of course, is just the greatest, that he actually, scrounged up his old cards from his childhood to make this deck happen.
Yeah, I think that's so emblematic of the dark and also the dark reprints, that this is the kind of stuff that I remember from, when I was 12 years old. You saw a million copies of freaking, Apprentice Wizard and Ghost Ship and Dance of Many and whatever all over the place. That's just what we had. So it is not that is so it just that story rings so true. It's these kinds of cards are exactly what are in the shoebox, in your parents' house. Of course, this is the perfect event for this to happen, because suddenly Ghost Ship it goes from a kind of a fringe player, where you're debating between Ghost Ship and Azure Drake and some kind of offbeat, more controlling I just kind of fringe build to 93, 94 to a star, solid gold, 3 mana, 2/4 flyer that regenerates for blue. That's basically a Serendipity, right? Without the drawback. Yeah, I played against him, Ricardo, as well, actually, and the Ghost Ships were super impressive. Apprentice Wizard was able to do its thing, ramping out the Trikes and whatnot. 1 mana, Dance of Many. Actually, when he cast Dance of Many, he's like Dance of Creation. I'm like, Dance of Creation? You mean Dance of Many? He's like, well, the card's name in Italian is Dance of Creation. I'm like, that's actually kind of a better name, because that's what it does. It creates a token. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I like to, because the sideboard, he's got a sideboard mountain, which I'm assuming is that sometimes he's going to want to bring in some more of those red cards, and he'll swap an island out for it, which. Because these are the cards from his mom's basement, he didn't have his volcanic islands, and so just playing a deck like that would just feel, like you're saying, Dave, it would just feel like how life was actually in real life in 94, 95, when these cards were the freshest cards you could get your hands on. Mm-hmm. So.
And he played it unsleeved.
Awesome.
And I will say this, for deck photos, unsleeved cards look awesome. Mm-hmm. You don't have to worry about glare. The colors are so vibrant; they really pop. This deck photo is sweet, and it's in a large part because there's no sleeves on those things.
Yeah, and the dark, the Italian, the dark cards, they look good. In the FBBs too, just the core set ones, the colors, whatever problems they had with the colors in revised, which now are nostalgic for some people, but they got the colors right on the various foreign non-English language cards. So.
Mm-hmm. We have to mention the Power Sync Psychic Venom combo. Can't leave this page without at least mentioning that synergy. Yeah, hats off to him for putting this together and just saying let's do it. This is exactly what you want to see in these tournaments.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Awesome. Well, next up.
So next we have Brian Lindbacher, who's the last of the Spice winners. There were all of the people we've looked at so far won a Spice prize. Brian is on the colorless deck, but he's on not quite the same colorless deck as the max power version of the colorless deck. Mm-hmm. So this one is it still has the 4 Standing Stones and the 4 Felwar Stones, which are a big draw for this deck. But it's just got the 1 Book of Wraths. And then really, it's got those Trikes, it's got the Coal Golems, it's got the Diabolic Machines. And so it's kind of got this creature beatdown. More of an aggro approach, and then it plays it has some Stone Calendars, which are good, and then it plays the 2 Titania songs, which kind of combo off nicely with all of the other artifacts, which again, like a Felwar Stone under Titania song, is a 2/2, not a 0/0. So it's playing. This is more of a powerful deck, but it's a spicy build of a powerful deck. I thought with a lot of fun cards in here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does have this kind of like plan A, plan B, like 1-2 punch kind of thing, right? You're shopping out robots and whatnot that just attack on their own, but then you also have all these, weird artifacts, that cost whatever 2, 3, 5, 6, that you can just drop the song at the very end and attack with the rest of your board. Because if they have removal for them, they're probably focusing the removal on your machines and your golems and trikes and stuff.
Yeah, Stone Calendar is an interesting one. I had tried that at least goldfishing a little bit with the deck that I played, and I mean it's really good with Titania Song and all these other things going on in his deck. So it's pretty neat. But I decided not that for my list it was. It didn't feel necessary, and then it's also like it's a reserve list card, and it's like $30. I'm not sure I want to get that for my deck for the tournament, but yeah, it's definitely a cool one. 3 mana to decrease the cost of all the rest of your spells by 1. I mean that's pretty good. Mm-hmm. So
I don't know. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say this deck, completely changing the subject, this deck is just a great example of using workshops for good and not evil. Just like getting all the spice out there, so that you can actually play with it. You don't have to, hard cast some of these crazy things.
Yeah, I actually saw a match that, it was like turn 1 workshop Stone Calendar go. Like, now you're doing something that's interesting with this card. So, yeah.
Yeah, we're in. Here's a riddle for you guys. Mm-hmm. Rainbow Veil in the sideboard?
So I was looking at that also and trying to figure out what it was for. And I never came up with an answer.
I am also drawing a blank. I'm sad to say. It might be an inside joke.
Yeah. Maybe it comes in with the blasts. Like maybe if he changes up, if he goes and brings in 7 blasts or something, or 8 up to 8 blasts, I guess, that he just needs to swap in a Rainbow Veil for a factory or something. But
yeah, but he's already playing the 4 Standing Stones, and you think Felwar Stone most of the time will get you the colors that you need, probably. Well, maybe not in a more monocolored meta. You don't see as many like City of Brass necessarily.
Maybe you want it with the red blast for energy flux.
Okay.
So that if they energy flux and they turn off all of they kill all of your mana rocks, you still have because he doesn't have a mountain. So he actually doesn't have any red sources besides those 8 artifacts. And
so he has forest, swamp, island, and no City of Brass.
Yeah, no ruby.
No, I think that is a ruby.
I think the Emerald, Soul Ring, Sapphire, and Jet.
Is that a Soul Ring?
It's a Soul Ring. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's like a Brossard.
That's a
Brossard altered.
Yeah.
Soul Ring. Amazing altars, by the way. Well, Coal Golem is a red source. Come on, Shawn.
That's true. I don't know the dark rules out here. And he's got a Lotus too, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, what is the main deck Tranquility afraid of? Flux, I guess.
Yeah.
Flux really, but if you're untapping to cast a sorcery speed at Tranquility, it's too late, man.
You're in trouble.
Yeah, it's too late.
The other maybe he kills his own Titania song sometimes. maybe that was
turn it off.
Yeah.
Sure.
Another card that actually isn't in this deck, but was in a lot of the colorless decks that was pretty. I don't know. It's a spicy card for sure. It was also sort of format defining for these decks. Was the Bone Flute? Which is that's just a quick way to with all the cost reductions, it just taps to give -1/-0 to all creatures, and so it's almost a moat. So yeah, that's like a good defensive card that I saw popping up in some of these colorless decks.
Yeah, for sure. Between Bone Flute and Holy Light, I really think this format is and like stuff like Brothers of Fire, like I really think this format is in some ways like No Country for 1/1s. Especially like I'm thinking about like the green suite, like the Scavengers and Elves of Deep Shadow, and the 8 zero cost goblins in red, like while exciting. Well, and also stuff like Ball Lightning, right? Mm-hmm. Well, I guess Bone Flute is not really an answer to Ball Lightning, but the 1/1s. There are some things that make it really inhospitable for those guys.
Do you know? So, Dave, you know everything about Pendelhaven, so you probably know the answer to this question. If I attack with a 1/1 Scavenger Folk, and then they Bone Flute my attack, I can Pendelhaven
in response. Yeah,
but if I Pendelhaven first,
they can Bone Flute in response.
And then does my Pendelhaven fizzle? Or I still
it checks on resolution. Like it checks when it goes on the stack, or when you put it on the stack and at resolution to see if the creature is a 1/1.
So Bone Flute also like makes. I mean, I guess there's this stalemate where neither of you want to act.
Yeah, exactly.
So it just stays a 1/1. But yeah.
The intricacies of Pendelhaven. So, these are Dave's published works.
Well, speaking of, actually, I think our next deck we can go to, which is Dave's deck. So Dave won the event with this deck. Actually, the first person to reach the center of the maze was Brian Lindbacher, but he didn't get the spell correct that you have to cast, which is what you get the clues for. There's a lot there. But Dave was the second person to the center of the maze, and he correctly got the spell to dispel the pestilence and win the event with this deck, which, among other things, features 2 Pendelhaven in a deck with no cards that are not white. Dave's deck was actually on the short list for a Spice Award, but since he won the event, I decided not to give him one. Spread the love around a little bit to some other people. Yeah. And I thought this deck, there were a few white decks that were played. Many of them featured Preacher, which is very strong in the format. Holy Light, very strong in the format. Pikeman is pretty strong. Banding and First Strike is not bad on a 2-drop. Or a 1-drop. It's one drop. One colorless drop. Yeah, so
you can play it off of Pendelhaven or Strip Mine.
Yeah, so that's great. Cool. That's like a nice little edge to have there. And so this deck kind of does what you want to see your weenie deck do, but it has the Army of Allah and the Crusade to sort of finish things up. There's 3 Geddons in here, always good with a deck with lots of creatures. So there's a lot to like about this deck. I think that and Dave, you can maybe tell us more about this, but the Knights of Thorn were also like a seemingly pretty strong meta call, given that red was expected to be one of the stronger colors. So.
I mean, I think I would disagree with the suggestion that this is spicy at all. I thought I was spiking pretty hard, and it was also I ended up on this deck as a meta call, right? I thought about. So, I mean, I spent weeks hemming and hawing and looking at the color. I wanted to play green. I love green. I think Spitting Slug is awesome, and wanted to make that work. Red was also very attractive for obvious reasons. I would have played like the Goblins, Ball Lightning, kind of all in, go to the face strategy. But I kept coming back to, just looking at the whole spoiler, thinking about the best ley line discounts and all the colors. I kept coming back to Holy Light And just looking at that, I'm like, man, if anyone finds this thing, because Holy Light's already kind of a sneaky fringe sideboard card in vanilla 93, 94, believe it or not. It kills. It's a great way for white to kill Order of the Ebon Hand, which has pro white and otherwise is very hard to deal with. It mows down stuff like Birds of Paradise and Llanowar Elves. It mows down goblins. Like there are matchups where you would want a card like that, and it's a one-sided wrath too, right? It doesn't hurt your guys. And I thought, man, like Holy Light is just a format defining effect. At 2 mana, instant speed, non-white creatures get -1/-1. Like that is a serious thing. And if you're bringing, the Scavengers and Elves of Deep Shadow and the, Goblin digging teams or whatever else, or Order of the Ebon Hand, Bog Rats, Bogim, whatever, Apprentice Wizards, like it hits all these different things. I wanted to be the person casting Holy Light and not the person getting my stuff blown out by a card that I maybe overestimated, like its prevalence in the meta. I think if we played this format for a while, stuff like Holy Light, stuff like Brothers of Fire, and stuff like Bone Flute would really, it would make weenie decks a lot less runnable. Just it's not a very hospitable environment for those guys. So white does a couple different things. So I thought that the best decks on paper outside of white were like a variety of colorless builds, and I tested a couple. I actually tested against Jeff Liu, who was playing a deck similar to Mike's, right? The Book of Wrath, sort of Book of Wrath as Lich, like combo deck, Mirror Universe stuff, Ivory Tower, all that. Came away from that match thinking, oh my god, what is this format? Book of Wrath is insane. And I played against Mark Flore, who I don't know what he ended up with ultimately, probably something in the colorless space, but he was playing more of it was a Workshops deck, also featuring Book of Wrath and this other stuff. He was shutting my guys out with like Barl's Cage and all kinds, Bone Flute and all kinds of gnarls. I'm like, oh my god. So having those experiences, I thought red was very obviously powerful, and so I knew I wanted to pre-board against red essentially with the 3 Knights of Thorn and 3 Repentant Blacksmith, with access to the rest of those play sets in the sideboard. I thought mono green looked really good, and so I thought that the banding creature, so like Pikeman is amazing, Javelineers is amazing against green, Preacher's really good against green, and then Holy Light, one board, I think I ended up with two side. All that stuff kind of handles green pretty well, and then you can also swords like a Slug or the other kind of like low power, high toughness guys around. And then the other thing that white gives you is the best artifact removal suite, in the business, right?
Right.
So started out with the 3 Disenchant and the 1 Dust to Dust main, and Dust of course costs 2 mana, which is so different. 1 white is so different than 1 white. It's amazingly different. Especially in a lower to the ground, like a 4-strip environment. Like dusting 2 things on turn 2 is backbreaking for those colorless decks sometimes. So, and then out of the sideboard, I have 2 more Dust to Dust, 2 Divine Offering, the 4th Disenchant. I even looked at Damping Field, the card from Antiquities. It's 2 and a white. It's an enchantment that is basically Winter Orb for artifacts. And I thought with, oceans of these mana rocks, Fellwar Stones, Standing Stones, all the, Bone Flutes and robots and whatnot, the Damping Field actually could be a thing here. We're not splashing blue or anything. We don't have energy flux, but Damping Field does a decent energy flux impression. So, and yeah, I started out, let's see. I won a couple and then I lost a couple. I thought I was out of the game, really, at 2-2. But then I don't know, won another one. I think I got a bye, but the bye didn't last very long, which was just a kind of a nice accident of the dynamic, round timer. So I got back into it relatively quickly out of the bye round, and then just got lucky enough to stack wins. So I know in the second to last round for me, I played against Jamie Park, who he was at 6 wins, but 1 was a bye, so he needed 1 more match win. Yeah. And he said that he had solved the puzzle already. So I was lucky enough to, and he was also he and Mano played the same deck, like a workshop driven, like Book of Wrath, frat party of all the best colorless cards. And they were both doing really well. Was lucky enough to escape that match with a win. And then that's really when, like I said, it felt like a race before. That's really when I was like, the nerd adrenaline, was pumping. It was just trying not to be rude to my final opponent, Justin Flynn from Australia, who was very tired by that point. He's like, oh, come on, man. But of course he's on blue and he's playing ghost ships and just like gumming up everything. We went to, did we go to 3 games? At any rate, even if it was two games, it took a long time. It felt like it took forever because I'm like, at any second, one of the rival wizards could, arrive in the center of the maze. And I was right about that. Right, Brian Lindbacher was there first. A minute or 2 ahead of me. Yeah. And I don't know, like that. That whole feeling of just being in this foot race and but also trying to balance being a good human being and an opponent, like being polite to my opponent and all that stuff. There was a really interesting dynamic. I think it was a really cool design. I wouldn't like every tournament to be like that. And there is a lot to think about, like we said, in terms of different levers and variables that you can change and continue to experiment with. But the wonderful thing is that we have this space, we have this community, we can experiment, we can do all this weird stuff together. And it's super fun. This was funky and fresh, and I absolutely loved it. So thanks, Shawn, for putting this together. Yeah,
I mean, I it was kind of a labor of love putting it together. Like I like thinking about, like, this is now the third sort of offbeat format that I've put something together for, and I really enjoy doing it. And I'm glad that everyone seems to have had a good time, had fun brewing, had fun playing, and then also nothing majorly went wrong. So like I had to write some software to like make all this work and stuff, and there were no crashes. I had to fix a bug during the event that happened successfully, and so I'm just glad I'm glad it worked. I'm glad everyone had fun. But I do, Dave, though, have 2 questions for you about 2 cards. The first one, Fire and Brimstone. Did you bring that in ever, or was it there for the Hamilton meme?
It was there for the meme. Yeah. Okay. I was even talking to my wife about it before. I was like, is it my father was a Fire and Brimstone teacher or preacher? And she's like, no, it's like my grandfather. I'm like, oh, okay. I'll write that in the comment when I upload the deck photo. It was actually the 4th Holy Light. And I took it out at the last minute. It is a card from the dark. Mm-hmm. I like Fire and Brimstone probably more than, I don't know who's even cast this card. I kind of like it in Singleton. So I play White Weenie in Singleton a lot. And it is a sort of a funny, last ditch thing to have that they will never play around in a million years. Like for a certain board state or game state where you've attacked the hell out of them with your weenies, like you've gotten them down pretty far, but you can't close it out. And then they've stabilized. Maybe they've cast a balance or whatever, or put a bunch of big guys. They stabilize to the point where they can start attacking you again. And they swing in with whatever, I don't know, an Urnum Djinn or their own Serene, something like that. Bam, 5 mana. throw that sucker down, burn you out for 4. I burned myself too, but my life total's higher because I've been the beat down this entire game. You just lost to Fire and Brimstone. It's a thing that is possible. It's possible. It's a possible thought. I mean,
there's a universe where that happens.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And here it costs 4 mana, so it's even more possible. I never boarded it in. Obviously, it was just there for the Hamilton thing.
The other card I wanted to ask about, which you elected not to play, which I was hoping to see at some point in the event get cast, was Tividar's Crusade.
Yeah.
And so I know you, the Holy Light came into the calculations there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I talked to Mark Flory about this too the day or two before. He said, like, come on, this is like the dark event. You know, these goblins are going to be running around. Like, this is the place to play Tividar's Crusade. And I'm like, you know, Holy Light just does almost everything that Tividar's Crusade does, but it does it cheaper and it does it at instant speed. It just has all this other upside. You know, it handles green, it handles black, it handles blue. And of course, I got into a game against a Goblins player who had the full complement of Goblin heroes, which is it's a 2/2 for 2. It's a bear in this format, and Goblin King. None of the little goblins. I Holy Lighted like one digging team just to say like, I Holy Light your digging team. Is like, yeah, sure. I've got 2 heroes in play. Like, I don't need this. So in that exact game, I was like, oh, Mark was right. I should have played a Tividar's Crusade just to have it. I mean, maybe it should have been that instead of the Fire and Brimstone, but I had Preacher. So the Hamilton thing seemed to be more important than this very extreme corner case with the Goblin heroes. Yeah,
clearly memes are way more important than actual games. So I agree. I agree with you there.
I mean, if you play in the old school community for long enough, I feel like everyone is going to be running 14 card sideboards sooner or later, because you start to accumulate these jokes and stuff, and maybe you win a shark, or maybe you lose a fantasy football league and have to run a dingus egg in your sideboard for an entire year. Like, these things happen to the living, and I don't know. That just means that we're doing it right. I think by giving up some EV or whatever, giving up some edge to just show people that, like, we're in this. It's a community. We're all having fun.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Well, yeah, this was just a really great event, and the whole idea is really cool, and I hope that you keep doing more stuff like this, Shawn. Did you have anything else that you wanted to sort of mention before we close this out?
No, I mean, I think we got really into the weeds on the format and how to build the decks and stuff. So, like, if there are people out there who have ideas or thoughts they want to share, like, I guess email or Twitter message our Emerald City Trolls account. So the email is emeraldcitytrolls@gmail.com, and the Twitter is Emerald Sea Trolls, at Emerald Sea Trolls, letter C in the middle there. And I guess just stay tuned. Like, this won't be the last weird thing I put together. There's talk of maybe running this back. There's also, like, there was some people were bringing up maybe we should have something like this for Legends, where, like, you get cost reductions for the gold Legends, because there are some stuff in Legends to leave alone, like Moat and Mana Drain and Abyss. Like, those cards are great already, but the gold Legends need some help. And so maybe there's something around that. So just kind of stay tuned. Like, follow us on Twitter. That's a good way to find out when these things come out. There will probably be something new in maybe 6-ish months or so. That's kind of the cadence I seem to be working at here. And it probably will be Legends next. So
awesome.
So stay tuned. Yeah.
Sounds fun.
Yep.
All right. Well, I guess that'll do it. Congrats to Dave again for winning the event, and thanks for joining us, Shawn.
Yeah, and I guess I lied, and I will say one very final thing just to reiterate my first point. Thanks to the players, everyone who put in the effort to brew. This event was successful in large part because people took it seriously, put in the time, brewed cool decks, and showed up to have fun. Nobody was an asshole. You could imagine with the timer, it would be very easy for the assholes to take over and sort of people berate their opponents into, you know, scooping the whole match after they lose the first game or something like that. That didn't happen as far as I know. And so I think that's, again, this is something that it works well in an online format where most of the people are at least internet familiar with each other. There's no true randoms. 31 people, that was a really good size for this event. Like,
yeah, it felt perfect.
Probably more than 40 or so, and you start to get weird maybe, and then less than 20, and then you end up having to replay the same people in order to have matches fire. So yeah, thanks to the players, the people who participated did a great job. We raised, I should also make sure to say this, we raised $585.14 for Action Against Hunger, which is a great charity. They do work worldwide to help not just feed people who are hungry, but are to provide them recurring ways to get food, agriculture, things like that. Awesome. And last year, in 2020, they helped 17 million people in 46 countries get fed, and so really happy to be supporting that organization. 93% of everything they raise goes to the programs, which is a good ratio for a charity.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And so they're great. I'm really glad that we were able to raise that for them. So,
awesome.
Yeah.
Well done.
Cool.
All right, guys. Yeah, well, looking forward to the next time we can do this. And thanks for watching, everybody. And take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.